Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Eric Coleman with IIST and I will be the moderator for today's webinar, Improving Mobile User Experience by Phil Liu. We're excited you're able to join us today. Set aside an hour to attend this webinar. This webinar is one of a series of free webinars to introduce the topics as well as the presenters of the upcoming PSQT conference in San Diego, California, August 14th through the 19th at the Sheraton San Diego Hotel Marina. PSQT is the only conference that focuses on practical best practices in every aspect of software quality assurance and testing. The ongoing theme of the conference, Practical, Proven, Feasible, keeps the focus on what works. To learn more about this exciting conference, visit psqtconference.com. You may submit your questions at any time by using your question box in your GoToWebinar window. Today's presenter will answer as many questions within the time allowed at the end of today's session. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available for viewing within 48 hours at psqtconference.com. At the end of today's webinar, you'll be asked to complete a short survey. At IIST, we strive to provide the highest quality educational resources for the public and would appreciate it if you could take a few minutes to complete this short survey. I will now turn the webinar over to today's presenter, Phil Liu. Phil?
Hi, Eric. Thanks a lot. Today's session is on improving mobile UX, and here's just a short, brief intro on myself. This is my LinkedIn profile. You can find it online anytime. But I think what I'd like to talk about more is, the mobile landscape. And I guess this is probably what the mobile landscape looked like back in 2006, 2007, pre-iPhone, when it was really wide open. And then with the arrival of the iPhone, you had a few people starting to publish applications, but it was still quite lonely. And here today, you can see that everybody is really vying for their spot in the App Store and trying to make their users happy and satisfied. And a lot of people don't realize that that is really done through mobile UX. And so you might want to know, what is mobile UX? So that's what we're going to be talking about today, what it is and how to improve it. So, why are you here? I have this, I like color codes, and usually, I give quite an interactive session face-to-face. I know this is a webinar, so feel free to ask questions, as Eric said, in the question panel. And I think that one of the key questions that you should be asking yourself with respect to mobile UX is, what are some of the biggest mistakes that I could make, and how do I avoid those mistakes? And I'm hoping to cover some of that today. Again, this is just a teaser for a session that I'm going to be giving at the conference in August in San Diego. But I think if you look around you, you can find many UX lessons just in your life. And I was in China just a few weeks ago, and I took this picture and I said, isn't this a perfect picture of the way that UX should not be? And if you think about it, you look at it and say, okay, well, how does this apply to UX? You think, well, it's pretty complicated. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's not very simple. There is something good here that I see in that the red and yellow sign really sticks out. So you can learn some real simple lessons from just just walking around the streets as far as UX goes, and what things grab your attention, what things are clear to you, what things are not clear, what things are confusing, eyesores, things like that. And we can actually apply these kinds of things directly to our mobile application. So, today I'll cover three basic things. The first one is, one of the keys of mobile UX, and that is understanding your users deeply. The second one is that, a lot of times we want to focus on usability principles such as, using the right colors and contrast and font sizes and things like that. And those are just the beginning. Users expect a lot more than just good usability these days. So we'll cover some of that as well as some of the things that you can do above and beyond that. And then I'm going to just have a little short example of applying UX principles into our daily lives. Just to set some expectations, because user experience is based on surpassing expectations. So, whenever I have green, green indicates that, I would like it to be interactive, and hopefully you'll ask questions. The second thing is that you've probably already noticed that I don't read slides. I didn't learn to read well in college, but I still managed to graduate, but I still do that here. I don't really read the slides. They're really intended as a takeaway for the audience, and I'm sure that Eric will have them through the webinar broadcast. And again, this is really just an appetizer for a session that I'm going to be giving, which would be an all-day session on how to improve mobile UX. So here's a little bit about usability and UX and why we're here, why it's important. I think one of the biggest things that has happened over the last 10 years is that we've changed basically our whole business model in software, and that began with Salesforce and having the SaaS-based model with a subscription-based economy where you didn't buy software anymore, but you actually kind of rented it by the month. And so, you think about, so what did that change as far as user expectations? Well, if you're not frozen into a piece of software that you went to CompUSA and bought and took home for $500, what does that mean? Well, that means that you can switch more easily. That means that you're not tied to a certain software, and you have a little bit less, sunk costs. So you're more likely to switch. And so if you're not happy with what you have, if you're not satisfied with the quality, then you can just go someplace else. So that's the first thing. And the other thing that's really changed is that with all of these platforms available to us now, with smartphones and with tablets, and so now people are starting to do things on one platform and then transition to another platform to complete it. So, if, like, for instance, myself, I may look at stuff on Amazon on my mobile when I'm outside somewhere and put it in my cart, but then, when I get home, I want to look at those things in a lot more detail before I actually buy it. So a lot of times, we have to provide an integrated experience across platforms, and those are the kind of things that are a little bit extra that will put you over the top as far as delivering a good experience to your users. Now, this slide here is about 2 years old, and so my question to you today, this should be in green to engage some participation. My question to you today would be, how would this be different? And I would say that email is still going to be up there as one of the top things that people do, but you can see that you have email, Facebook, browsing, games. Standard applications are not on here, and so I would bet that there's things on here that would be more prominent, such as Yelp, such as maybe a banking application, things like that, and that people are using their mobile apps for a lot more than they used to. And on the right-hand side, do you remember I said that user experience is primarily driven by expectation. If you think of these little guys playing with their iPads here, you wonder, what will be their experience and their expectation 5 years from now. And those are the kinds of things that we need to think about as we go forward, thinking about mobile UX and how to improve it. Now, the big thing is that things are merging together. And I was just having a conversation with Eric before the session started here today, and he was saying that the IoT session, the IoT webinar, really generated a lot of interest. And really, first we had web, of course, with WebApps and access to the web, and then that was given to us through the mobile channel. in addition to the applications. And now we have IoT, and IoT comes in two forms. One of them is commercial form, and then the other one is industrial form. And in the commercial form, one of the biggest applications is your wearables that you have. I just have two here on my wrist that show this little picture, but actually I probably have about, I did a little inventory. I think I have about 8 or 9 wearables, believe it or not. And, I think that wearables, you may think it's not really related to mobile, but wearables, almost all of them are tied to a mothership, and the mothership is your mobile phone. And that's why all these things have become integrated together, and why mobile user experience is so important. Okay, so the first number one rule in terms of improving your user experience on the mobile platform is really understanding your users deeply. And that has to do with context. And so you may wonder, what is context? Well, it's really simple. It's those 5 who, what, where, why, and how, right? So you think about who your users are, where they are is important too, and now we have that information via geolocation, but where they are is something new with mobile because they're not sitting behind their desktop anymore. What they do is also something that's different with mobile because they could be in the middle of something, they could be jogging, they could be with their friends, they could be in a cafe, they could be outside where it's very light and they can't see their application very well. And of course how they do it, that could be things like they're on the move, or maybe they're sitting down, or things like that. And probably one of the most overlooked context questions is why they're doing it. What is their goal that they're trying to accomplish? And how is that goal different on a mobile platform than it would be on a desktop-based platform? And the last one, and this has to do with social networking, and that is with who are they doing it, right? Who is around them, and who are they working with, who are they communicating with? All that has to do with the new context of mobile apps. Here is some information from a study that was done on the different types of things, types of UX context factors that are involved. You can see that 35% of entries in this particular study had different locations as an important part of context. Another one that I mentioned that I forgot to mention was the time, right? So the time of day and the day of week, that's an important contextual factor to think about, because people might behave or think differently on a Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock than they do on a Monday morning at 9 o'clock. So they're interested in different things. They may be looking at different things. They may have different people around them on those different times. And those kind of things have to be thought about when you're designing your mobile UX. So, the thing that's really powerful about the mobile platform is now that we have all of these sensors around us, so we have the typical social channels feeding into the mobile phone, time, data coming from all different directions, different gauges and sensors, direction. All of this is really, the mobile phone is really serving as a contextual and data hub for all of our applications. And so the question is, what are you as an application developer, how can you use this information and this data to give a better experience for your users? Of course, there's many other sensors. I think I saw there's an application the other day about putting your mobile phone on your belly, and it was going to be sensing your breathing and your relaxation. So there's all kinds of things that you can think about. So, I mentioned earlier just a minute ago about social being an important part of context. And so, a lot of these fitness wearable type apps, they have a sharing component with them as far as, how far you ran or who you ran with or things like that. And a lot of times they're tied to diet or eating or nutrition type applications where you enter in what you ate that day and so forth, and you can share all that with your friends. And so my question to you is to really think about what is the payback for that? Why do users want to do that? And how can you use that in your application as a driver for engagement? And so let's go on to the next thing, which is really what context is all about, in enabling you to really think more carefully about where their user is, what they're doing, and so on, so that you can provide a better experience to them through what I call anticipation and satisfaction. And if you think about this comes from this definition on the left here, comes directly from ISO 25010, which is defining what usability is and satisfaction. And you can see that, pleasure and comfort and likability, those kinds of things really drive towards making a user feel good about things. And a lot of that can be driven through anticipating what they want and providing them with convenience. And so the convenience means, and the anticipation is more than just selling stuff. So, a lot of times we think of, applications collecting our data, and we feel kind of creepy about it that they're collecting stuff like that. And then you, of course, see advertisements that for websites that you visited, a few hours ago or whatever. But what I'm talking about is something different than that, and that is really thinking about what kinds of things will your user need and want based on what they're doing in the moment to help them have a better experience, right? So we don't want to destroy their trust by trying to push something towards them, making them think that we're watching them, but rather we want to really think about what can we do to make them feel good about sharing their information with us such that we are providing a better experience, providing better service, and so forth. So I think a good example is that, simply when you call into a call center, and if you call an airline and they ask you to put in your frequent flyer number or something like that, if they answer you and they say, hello, Mr. So-and-so, I see you're going on a flight tomorrow. Is there something I can help you with on that flight? Or your seat, I see that you're in a aisle seat. Perhaps I could move you to a window. Something like that, where they're not necessarily trying to sell me something, but they're helping me to have a better experience on my upcoming flight. This is another example that in terms of creating satisfaction, you can see on the upper left, I'm there. This is in China, actually. I'm there ordering a beer. And, one of the things that bothers me about China is they don't have a good notion of customer service. And so when you order a beer, they may bring me a beer, and then after that, I have to ask, if I want a glass, I have to ask for it. If I want a napkin, I have to ask for it, and so forth. And so think about, the types of customer service that you experience at a good restaurant, right? So if you go to a restaurant and you order something, wouldn't it be great if they actually brought you things ahead of time? Or even better is that they know that you're thinking about something, and the minute you turn around to ask for something, the waiter is right there with it in their hands, ready to give it to you, because they're really thinking about your needs and what you want. And, of course, what you're doing at that particular moment. So let's say you ordered drinks, and then you had a few sips of your drink, and then you're thinking, okay, I think I'd like to have some appetizers. and then the waiter is right there just about to walk up as you have a few sips of your drink. Hello, would you like to order some appetizers now? So, and this gets to the next thing is that, you have to think about who the user is. So, unless your application has random users, don't optimize for random users. Think carefully about who the actual user is. And, a lot of this is done through user personas and things like that. So think through those personas very, very carefully. This is a definition from ISO as well, and what's interesting is that even though this definition is 20 years old, it still applies to today. And so when you think about it in terms of thinking about the specified users, thinking about their specified goals, what they want to accomplish, what they want to get done, and helping them to accomplish those things with satisfaction, right, effectively, being able to complete whatever it is they want to get done, and being able to do it very quickly, efficiently, in a specified context of use. So you need to think about, again, the context of what your users are trying to get something done in. And so, again, context could be, you have to think who your users are, what their goals are. You may have some other ideas of who your users are. Obviously, if you're designing a application for inventory tracking in a warehouse, your users are going to be different. Maybe they have big fingers, or maybe the warehouse is very dimly lit. So you have to think about different settings for contrast on your application. Maybe, if it's a game, of course, you have a different type of user who is really concerned about, going to the next level in the game. So you're really thinking about engagement and teasing and those kinds of mental things. On the other hand, if your user is a guy in a factory trying to accomplish something, they just want to get it done. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to have fancy colors or things like that. So all those kinds of things you need to think about. Now, as far as tasks, when you think about your users and what tasks they're completing and what goals they want to accomplish with their tasks, think carefully about the top tasks of your user group. The majority of an app's value is provided by a small number of tasks. It just gets back to the Pareto rule again, the 80-20 rule, right? 80% of the value is provided by 20% of the app. So think about those few tasks and then start designing tasks for those for that user. It could be, of course, you're going to want to have some very highly specific tasks, and then you're going to want to have directed tasks as well as some open-ended tasks for testing your application and looking at it and seeing if it provides a good experience in all of these types of tasks for your user group. So here's some tasks that are good for mobile, right? So tasks that have a deadline, you're out in shopping or something like that, and you forgot about something, you gotta go buy it for tomorrow for a wedding, or maybe you have to make a payment through your banking app and you forgot about it, it's due tomorrow, right? Rapidly changing information, so an information-based app like weather, or store opening hours, closing hours, things like that. And then sometimes, a lot of times you want to use your mobile for privacy. So if you're at work or something, and of course you don't want to use your desktop company laptop, you want to use your mobile phone, which perhaps will give you more privacy in the task that you're trying to complete. And then, you have to think about tasks that are not suited for mobile. So tasks that are not suited for mobile would be tasks that have a lot of steps in them, and of course tasks that require a lot of information, digesting information, or comparing information. So, even just think about your own self when you're out, using your mobile phone. When you have a big screen that to have to read, that's kind of discouraging, right? Especially if you're getting to be an older guy like myself and it's hard to see all those letters. Um, so really understand clearly, you can still think about these complicated tasks, these multi-step tasks, but perhaps they may start on one platform and then do something a little bit on another platform and then go back to the old platform and so forth. Um, this is really true with a wearable because, for instance, my Garmin application, I've got my little Garmin tracker on my wrist, right? That's a wearable. But then also it has a mobile app where I can, after I go for a run, I can go out into the mobile app and I can see some of the statistics on my run, how far I went and so forth. But of course the mobile app's a little too small to see everything. If I want to really get deeper and look at something and look at some reports and some comparison and things like that, then I need to go to the web app, and then I go online on the web app and I can see things like my heart rate over time during my run. I can look at things like my cadence and so forth. So all those kinds of levels of detail that I would want to look at on a web app are different than what I want to see on my mobile phone because it's just too small, too hard to get all of that information. So the next section is of today's presentation is on just some basic UX principles, and we really have to excel at these things. This is really the first step. It's kind of like if you don't eat your green beans, you can't have any dessert, basically. And if you think about it, in order to trust someone, right? If you want to trust somebody, think about the kinds of people that you trust. And these are the kinds of things, principles that we need to incorporate into our mobile app as a basic part of the usability to generate trust for our users in our mobile app and in our company. So, we trust people that are straightforward, right? So you don't want an app that is really complicated with lots of things moving around and so forth. We trust people that, if they make a mistake, they say, hey, I made a mistake, and this is what I'm going to do to correct it, right? And so if you think about your mobile app, if you have errors, an error message, you want error messages that are clear and understandable and say you're sorry and you're going to fix things. So those things that that generate trust in our own personal lives really can be transported over to mobile UX and mobile usability and design. So this is a partial list of some of the things that we cover in the workshop. I'm just going to cover one or two here, I think. But basically, here's some very simple usability characteristics that you need to take a look at in order to do correctly and implement well, and therefore you can generate that kind of simplicity and trust in your user. The first one that I'm going to talk about here is typing. And what we want to do, and this has to do with errors, right, because we want to reduce errors and we want to make things easy and not complicated for the user. And so our goal here is really to reduce what I call the cost of typing, because typing is very expensive in terms of time and effort. We all know that it's kind of a big pain in the butt to type a lot of stuff into our mobile phone. Even with them getting larger and larger, it's still no fun. You still have to peck around with your thumbs. And so we want to be able to reduce that as much as possible. So some of the things you might think about in terms of characteristics, it would be deletion of defaults. So you want to you want to have a default, of course, to avoid the user having to type something in. But on the other hand, you want to make it easy for them to delete that default so they don't have to use the backspace key to get rid of that default. The second thing is, you want to make your application typing mistake tolerant, so that if they enter something incorrect, that it comes back and helps them, right? Another thing you may want to have is computed values, so that some values are computed for them and then put in for them, and then they can change it if they want to. So, for instance, if you have a simple mortgage calculation application, you may want to do something like that. Widget entry is another one. We won't cover that here. Searching is another one. Navigation. I'll cover navigation a little bit here today. I think it's important to think about navigation. If you look at this application, this is the Yelp application. And so what's interesting to note about that is that navigation has really not yet been standard on a mobile app, and so it's starting to get standardized. You can see that I highlighted the menu bar on the bottom here, and so this is the beginnings of what I call de facto standardization, where a lot of apps now are showing up with this menu bar on the bottom. So what's important about that is that what's happening is that users are beginning to expect this kind of menu bar on the bottom, and like I said before, a big part of user experience is being able to satisfy those expectations. So unless you have a design that's mounds better than this is, then you would want to go with what your user expects. The second thing is that you want to minimize clicks, of course, and compress steps together. And when compressing steps together, of course, you need to really think carefully about what the user's goal and task is. So this gets back to analyzing the task and thinking about the user and what they're doing. Display and visibility, won't really cover that too much. Here's kind of just a summary, and the reason I have the running man up on the left, that has to think about what the user is doing. The guy that's lifting weights, right? Obviously, he's a big guy, so you may want to think about the size of people's fingers. The next one is a doctor, right? So doctors may use an application differently than a nurse, even though it's the same application, right? And then you have the eyeglasses there, and a lot of our user population is now getting older, so you have to think about the age of your user groups. And then, of course, the desktop and the astronaut, you think about, okay, well, where are people that are out there using our application? And then the paint cans represent, the different choices of colors that we have and providing contrast. Those are basic usability principles that we still have to keep in mind. And then the track lanes, we want users to be able to complete their tasks as fast as possible. So let's step through just a couple of simple examples in real apps so you can see kind of some stuff that I'm talking about here. Color creates emphasis. So I mentioned color with those paint cans, and color really influences behavior. So let's take a look at some things here. So remember I talked about a guy in a warehouse and how contrast for a guy in a warehouse is very important, or contrast for a person that's outside using the app is very important to be able to see things clearly. So you can see that the Bloomberg application here, I really like this because I can see it very clearly outside or inside. So think about your users and what kinds of colors are they used to, what kinds of colors would they like, that would be aesthetically appealing to them, and what kinds of colors would help them to see things better. Understanding the user. I think it's really important to think carefully about what the user is doing. And I'd put this part here about fancy because I just covered the color section there. Sometimes boring is okay. So if you remember the Yelp application, which was really kind of boring looking, it's okay because it really depends on the task and the user. You know, when you're out on a train and you're using the Yelp application, you really want to find the restaurant that you want to find. You don't really care too much about the color. But you do care about error prevention and typing. You do care about having things to be simple and easy to do. So depending on, who your user group is, again, and what they're trying to do, that should really drive your design. Here's an example of something that's a very, very simple task, and their use of color here. And you can see that Fidelity, they have a really huge button for preview order, and it's in green. There are no other colors on the screen, just that besides their logo. So it's a very simple task, and you can see that they don't want you to make mistakes. They want you to press that button. Here's the Yelp application I just mentioned. Like I said, sometimes boring is okay. And so you may think about, after you've gone through the workshop, you may think about, how can we improve this application? What kinds of things would help you to understand it easier, make it more useful, or generate more trust in your users? Just off the bat here, I can see some things for instance, in the icons. Some of these icons are really not that meaningful. So that's one of the things that you may think about in terms of improving your own app as well. Because one of the things that's important, as you remember, in generating trust is understanding, right? If you can't understand somebody well, if they're really complicated, if they talk with really big words, is that somebody that you're going to trust? Again, less is more. So think about the task at hand and what the user is trying to accomplish, and implement those top scenarios. What is the need that your mobile app is trying to mobilize? So, I've worked with some clients, and they say, oh yeah, we're converting our web app into a mobile app now, and so a lot of them make the mistake of actually putting all the functionality of their web app on their mobile app. And so think twice about that. Think about those top 5 things, like I said before. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about user experience and trust, right? So if you have the basic usability things, like I mentioned, color, simpleness, workflow ease, then you can start to get towards user experience and user satisfaction. And I think really that trust is really going to be the new currency going forward in terms of how we can differentiate ourselves and our apps in the new economy. So I mentioned convenience and anticipation before, but I think really, the questions that we have to ask ourselves is, first of all, what is trust? And second, how do we create it in our application? And so I kind of drew up this schematic here about trust development, and this applies actually to not only applications but also life, right? You think about it, you meet somebody in the beginning and you're kind of gathering information on them, and then perhaps you have one, what I call a trust event. Maybe you made an appointment with them for lunch and they showed up on time, right? That would be one element. And then you continue to evaluate and have other trust events, and then either trust is established or trust is broken or moves backwards. And in this case, of course, you don't want to shift to the left in terms of going backwards. So your application is really the same thing. It takes time to develop trust with your users, and you have to think about those trust events, those critical parts in your application when the user is trying to accomplish something where perhaps they make a mistake and you easily correct it for them. Those kind of things you have to think about as far as being able to develop trust with your users. I mentioned earlier that understandability is a big factor in influencing trust. Understandability and learnability. So if you think about an application that is complicated, difficult to understand, difficult to learn, how many of you just delete it off of your phone? I would bet a lot of you do. So if you can't really understand an app and learn it very quickly, more than likely you're going to delete it and just really just go someplace else and get another app. And that gets back to, when we talked about in the beginning of the webinar today in terms of the new subscription economy and how you can just, this cost for switching is very, very low. So your app has to be very understandable and very learnable. Of course, there are many other factors that influence trust as well, and we'll be going over that in the workshop. Here's another, just an emphasis on what I call lawyer talk versus something that's very simple. You can see here that this is very simple. We respect your privacy. Nothing will be shared until you say so. So I like this privacy message much better than some complicated lawyer speak that's very, very small that I can't read, right? Let's look at some usability principles in our daily lives. I think I mentioned before that I use a Garmin and I have 8 or 9 different wearables. Here's a couple of them here. This is my Garmin 920 on the upper left, and you can see that it measures a couple things, some pace, cadence, time, things like that. I've also got a Apple Watch, and what we're going to be doing in the class is going through our wearables and how we can actually make them more usable. Now, you can see that for my Garmin, I've got these different screens that I can have access to, and I can configure these screens any way I want. And this is the initial configuration that it comes with. You can see, at least from my point of view, it's not very usable. It's not really geared towards the tasks that I'm trying to complete. So when I think about the tasks I want to complete, well, think about actually being out riding my bike or running. And of course, riding a bike is different than running, because riding a bike you can actually look down and see the fields very clearly for a couple seconds if you don't want to crash, versus when you're running, you're not going to have a lot of time to lift your arm up and look at the fields. So you need to think carefully about what you're doing, what activity you're doing, things like that, and then what kinds of information are you interested in, and the placement of that information. So for instance, on these screens here, you can see that on the upper left I've got speed, heart rate, lap time, and then speed again. This is the initial configuration, but when I ended up adapting this for my own self, for my own usability, I want speed to be in the upper left all the time, because I want to be able to glance very, very quickly at that one spot and find what my speed is. So think about your application and the consistency of the placement of the icons, the consistency of the menus and the way things are located. Those kinds of things you can apply actually into your daily life and your daily usability, I guess you could say. So, my task would be, I want to know, a summary of statistics for the ride for that day, or maybe I'm doing some hills, some intervals or something like that. So I have to think of the specific tasks and what fields I want to look at. And so the same thing applies to our applications, right? So you can use these kinds of principles back and forth between real life and actually your software. As I said, the position of information is important. Like I wanted to have speed on the upper left all the time, so when I glance at it, right? The groupings of information are really important, whether or not I want to have summary statistics, or perhaps when I'm looking at speed, what other kinds of information are important to look at with speed at the same time. So if you think about your mobile app, if the user is doing a task, what kinds of information do they need to complete that task, or if there are one part of the task, what information is more relevant at that particular moment in the task than another piece of information. So here's just a brief summary of what we've covered today. I think that it's pretty clear that understanding your users is really important. That's really the key to good UX and thinking about their context, what they're doing. Excelling at basic usability principles, you got to do that. And then the best design is not always the best UX. And the example I gave today of that was the menu on the bottom of the mobile apps, how that's kind of become the de facto standard, which is what people expect. It may not be the best design, so you may come up with a cooler design, but unless the coolness and the actual usability and practicality of that coolness exceeds what users expect and the functionality that they have existing, then probably it's not a good idea to do that. And lastly, if you can do all of these things correctly, then you can really establish a long-term relationship with your users that's built on trust. Like I said earlier today, I'm going to be giving a full-day workshop on mobile UX as the new storefront on Friday the 19th. It's a full-day workshop. We're going to be doing a lot of exercises, and actually we're going to be doing some real usability testing. And what I'm going to show you is how you can do usability testing with 5 users. So that's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be hands-on, and we're going to learn a lot of stuff there. I'm also giving the closing keynote address on Thursday the 18th on IoT and the quality challenges that we face there. That's going to be a really exciting and dynamic session. I've started coming up with a material on that, and it's just so broad and so exciting, and there's so much new stuff happening, and the issues that come up with all of these new things is kind of daunting. And here we are for questions and answers.
While we're waiting for some attendees to ask some questions, do you have any typical questions that you get while I'm presenting this this webinar?
Sure. I would say that a couple of the questions would be, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen in working with clients in their mobile UX? And I would say that the biggest mistake that I see is they do a design and they have these they have some nice colors and they've got some the design is clean, but they don't really think carefully of the particular user group and what they're doing and what the user group lifestyle is. And like I said, I like to apply user experience and usability to my own life. And so, yesterday I was out working in my yard, and I was, I had some area landscaped about a year ago, and the landscape designer, talked about putting mulch down and how mulch would be a lot nicer than rocks and so forth. And so I was out there pulling up weeds, and I was thinking to myself, geez, didn't they consider that I don't have time to pull weeds? They should have put rocks down here. And so really we can apply these kinds of things to our user group. We really have to understand them deeply. It's not about, having cool buttons and nice colors. It's really thinking about the user and their lifestyle. So that's one big question. The other question that I often get is, okay, so we're going to be determining our users and their lifestyle and what they're doing. And, the next question, of course, is, well, how do we determine that? And I would say that that's something that, wasn't available to us that easily maybe 5 or 10 years ago. But through all of the analytics that we can collect these days, we can actually see what most of our users are doing, not only what they're doing, but if they're successful at what they're doing. So that's the power of analytics, and it's, People tend to think of analytics in terms of clicking and buying things, but we can use those analytics for other things like, is a user able to complete something? Where are they going? What are they doing? So it's a lot more powerful than just buying things. I would say those are the two big ones, Eric.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Phil. I don't see any other questions right now, so we'll close the webinar. I want to thank you, Phil, for your time today. I want to thank everyone for joining us for today's free webinar sponsored by IIST, the leaders in education-based certifications and training. For more information on how IIST can help you or your organization, please visit www.iist.org. You can follow IIST on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube to find out more information about IIST news, events, and promotions. Thank you all again for joining us today, and have a great day. Thanks again, Phil.
Okay, thanks, Eric.